The rapper, only 31 years old, passed away last night in a Los Angeles hospital. He had been diagnosed with AIDS but never knew how he had contracted the disease. To the world, he was the father of gangster rap, the founder of Ruthless Records, and the voice of an entire generation. But there are people who believe that his death was not as simple as it seemed. Eazy-E, whose real name was Eric Wright, publicly revealed that he had AIDS and just 10 days later he was gone. The suddenness of his illness raised many questions. Now, years later, the woman who knew him better than anyone else is speaking out. She spent years by his side, and she insists that no one saw what she saw or knows what she knows about him. At the age of 55, his former girlfriend is finally ready to tell her story, the truth about Eric Wright, the man behind Eazy-E. Her account is more than just a memory of a legendary rapper. She describes his sudden isolation in the hospital, strange moments that felt suspicious, and the harsh words of his rivals at the time. For her, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is her testimony, a piece of the story that has been hidden for too long within the music industry. This woman, Tracy Jernigan, was never in the spotlight. She was not in his music videos, nor did she appear in paparazzi photos. The cameras simply overlooked her. But for those who were close to Eric in his early days, Tracy was always there. She was steady, reliable, and quietly present while chaos surrounded him. Tracy first met Eric in January 1989, just before his fame exploded. At that time, he was not yet the godfather of gangster rap. He was a man with sharp eyes, quick words, and a fierce determination to make something of himself. He carried wounds from a difficult past, and while the world later saw only his tough persona, Tracy noticed something else: his vulnerability and his humanity. She didn't fall in love with Eazy-E the rapper. She fell in love with Eric the man. For 6 years they built a life together. It was not just about love. It was about surviving in a world where trust was rare and enemies were everywhere. They even raised a daughter, creating small moments of normal family life in an environment that was anything but normal. Tracy later recalled, "I was always trying to protect him. I just wanted him to know that I had his back and that I was there for him." Her words show not just affection, but her determination to be his safe place in a life full of conflict. But their story was not destined to end happily. Instead, it unraveled into a tragedy filled with unanswered questions, leaving a shadow over his legacy and haunting those who loved him most. To millions, Eric Wright was Eazy-E, powerful, fearless, and ruthless in both music and business. He was seen as a legend, someone who shaped the sound of a generation. But to Tracy, he was simply Eric. Her memories reveal the softer, more human side of the man behind the legend. Eric was not always the loud, commanding figure the world knew. In private, he showed tenderness and kindness. He was not demanding, but he was loyal, quietly proving it through everyday actions rather than words. In their home in Woodland Hills, away from the music industry's constant noise, they would sit together, quietly sharing moments that belonged only to them. Tracy also had a front-row seat to the creation of Ruthless Records. She watched Eric transform from a street hustler into a music executive, from a rising artist into one of the most influential figures in rap. It was exciting but also exhausting, as he carried the heavy responsibility of both his career and his community. Eric always believed in showing the truth, even when it was hard or uncomfortable. His music gave people the raw reality of life on the streets, but that honesty came at a heavy cost. He trusted very few people, and over time, the small circle he relied on grew smaller. In public, he looked confident, strong, and even dangerous. But in private, he was full of contradictions, tough on the outside but often quiet and guarded inside. He was surrounded by groups of people who wanted a share of his success, yet he kept his real self hidden from most of them. Tracy was one of the rare few who managed to break through those walls. She was someone he truly allowed into his world. When their daughter E was born, the world around them seemed to grow even more chaotic. Eric Wright, known everywhere as Eazy-E, was living inside a storm of fame, pressure, and conflict. His life was packed with long nights in the studio, constant tours, and very public arguments with rivals in the rap industry. But despite all that, Tracy remembers that Eric always tried to create a safe space for his daughter. "He took very good care of our daughter," Tracy said later, with both pride and sadness. "He wasn't the kind of father who could always be home, but he made sure he never felt forgotten." His way of being a father didn't always look traditional. It was shaped by the life he lived. He was a rapper, a businessman, a public figure, and at the same time a dad trying to be present. Sometimes that meant rushing to organize last-minute birthday parties, or making long phone calls while he was traveling. In a world where many famous men often distanced themselves from their children, Eric stood out because he never denied or hid his daughter. He supported her financially, emotionally, and legally. "He didn't just say he was her father," Tracy explained. "He proved it." Still, while he worked to balance fatherhood with his music career, darker signs began to appear. Tracy noticed unfamiliar faces around Eric, people who seemed out of place but were always nearby. Their presence was quiet but constant, like a warning no one could explain. As Eric focused on turning Ruthless Records into a music empire, it seemed like others were quietly watching, waiting, maybe even plotting. His role in the West Coast rap scene made him powerful, but it also placed him in a dangerous game that went far beyond music. In that environment, fatherhood wasn't only about love anymore, it was about survival. Then everything changed in early 1995. It started suddenly with a harsh cough, one that wouldn't go away. Eric, who rarely showed weakness, decided to admit himself into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in February. This alone shocked many people. He was known for his strength and control, not for asking doctors for help. Within days, the diagnosis came: AIDS-related pneumonia. For Tracy, the news felt impossible. Just before that, Eric had seemed healthy and full of energy. One day he's fine, the next day he's fighting for his life. "That's not how AIDS works," she recalled with disbelief. "Typically, AIDS takes months or even years to break a person down, causing visible weight loss, skin sores, and constant fatigue. But Eric had none of those signs. He looked strong until suddenly he wasn't. The confusion only deepened when doctors confirmed that Eric was not a drug user, something that was often linked to the spread of the disease at the time. Even more strangely, none of the women in his life, including Tracy, tested positive for AIDS. None of his children did either. How could he be so sick so fast, when the people closest to him were completely untouched? When Tracy began asking questions, the answers she got felt scripted, as though people were reading from a prepared story. The more she pressed, the more it seemed like there were things being hidden. The answers didn't come, she explained, and when they did, they sounded rehearsed, like the story had already been written. Eric's rapid decline was unlike anything she or anyone else had ever seen. To her, it felt like more than just a medical issue. It was as if unseen forces wanted to control how his story was told. The strange silence, the inconsistencies, and the speed of his illness all suggested that there was more going on behind the scenes. As Eric's life slipped away, Tracy and their daughter were left facing not just grief, but a cloud of suspicion and unanswered questions. The man who had worked so hard to build a legacy in music was now fighting an invisible battle that no one around him seemed prepared to face. As Eric's health declined rapidly, Tracy suddenly found herself shut out of his world. The man who once filled every room with sharp words and unstoppable energy was now hidden behind closed doors and guarded silence. For years she had stood by his side, but now she was no longer allowed near him. Access to Eric became something only a select few were granted. Lawyers with cold, clipped voices, security guards who barely acknowledged her, and family members who whispered to each other just out of earshot. His hospital room was no longer a place of care but a fortress. Behind those sterile walls, something darker seemed to be taking place. Secrets and decisions were being made without him, while Eric himself was left voiceless and powerless. Then Tracy learned something that shook her to her core. Eric had married another woman, Tomika Woods. The marriage was not a public event, but a quiet, almost hidden ceremony that reportedly took place at his hospital bedside, when he was too weak even to speak. Overnight, Tomika became the legal heir to Eric's estate. Tracy only found out after it had already happened, and when she tried to ask questions, she was met with silence. The man who had always valued his independence and fought for control was now completely stripped of it. Tracy couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. There was something happening behind those walls, she reflected bitterly. And he wasn't in control anymore. After Eric's death, chaos erupted. Grief quickly turned into an ugly fight for money, power, and control over his legacy. Lawsuits flooded ruthless records, the label Eric had built from the ground up. More than $600,000 mysteriously disappeared from company accounts, while files that had once been carefully stored simply vanished. Former allies turned on each other, suspicion replacing loyalty. At the center of it all was Eric's will. The document signed during his final fragile days left everything. His money, his rights, and his legacy to Tomika Woods. But whispers spread almost immediately. Was Eric truly aware of what he was signing? Or had he been pushed into it while too weak to resist? Even some of his closest friends questioned what really happened in those final moments. A former member of NWA remembered visiting Eric just days before he passed. "I saw him days before he died, and he still recognized me. He knew what was happening, but something wasn't right," he later admitted. The doubt in his words echoed the suspicions Tracy carried. The battle over Eric's estate was never only about money. It was about control of the story, who would tell it, and what version of Eric's life and death the world would believe. Then came the moment that changed everything for Tracy. She was watching a late-night television show when Suge Knight made a casual but chilling joke about injecting people with AIDS. The words hung in the air like a dark shadow. To others, it might have seemed tasteless or shocking. To Tracy, it felt like confirmation of her worst fears. Could someone have intentionally infected Eric? Could his death have been part of a deliberate act of cruelty and sabotage? In the quiet of her thoughts, she admitted something she had long tried to bury. "We suspected him all along." She had seen the strange looks, the tense silences, and the whispered rumors that surrounded Eric in his final days. She knew how much power he held, how many enemies he had, and how some people stood to gain everything if he was gone. In that moment, the ruthless side of the music industry was clearer than ever to her. It was not just about beats, fame, or rivalries. It was about survival, and Eric Wright, the man she loved, might have been deliberately taken down. The search for truth was long and painful. Even as time passed, Tracy's determination only grew stronger. The pain of losing Eric never went away, and the questions in her heart refused to fade. Along with her daughter Ae, she decided to uncover the secrets surrounding Eric's death.